Hello and welcome. I'm Emily, and you're here because you want to learn how to crochet. Whether this is the first time you've picked up a hook, or maybe you've learned before and you just need a refresher from scratch, you've come to the right place. So what I'm going to show you today are the two basic crochet stitches, the chain stitch and the single crochet stitch. And in fact, if you think that's a little too basic, some of my friends back here, like this guy, he was only made using those two stitches. So you can actually do a lot with just the chain stitch and the single crochet stitch. So first of all, what is crochet? Crochet is a fiber art, and when you're crocheting, the only thing you're doing is you're tying knots in yarn using a hook. That's it. The nice thing about crochet is that every single stitch you make, it's almost like a little building block. So you're building up row by row, one row on top of each other, and that makes it really easy to visualize what you're making. If you want to get started right away crocheting, you're going to need two things. You're going to need some yarn and a crochet hook. If you go to your local craft store, they will definitely sell crochet hooks. They're reasonably inexpensive. To start with, you're going to want a thick crochet hook. The thicker the hook, the easier it is to learn how to do the stitches. The yarn that you're going to want to buy is a nice medium weight yarn. Go for an acrylic yarn. Look on the label for anything that says medium or the number 4. That'll tell you that that's a nice thicker sized yarn to start with. Now that you've got everything you need, we can go ahead and get started. To begin with, I've got my worsted weight yarn, and I'm going to use an H or 5mm crochet hook to begin with. Your crochet hook doesn't have to be exactly this size, but it's a good idea to use one that's on the larger side as you're first learning to crochet. So like I said before, crochet stitches are built one on top of each other, kind of like little bricks. So before we do anything, we're going to need to start a foundation of stitches that we're then going to build on top of. So the first stitch we're going to do is a chain stitch. To begin with, you're going to need to create a loop with the yarn. Now there's probably a lot of different ways you can do this, but here's the way that I do it. I make like I'm about to tie a knot in the yarn. So when I'm going to tie a knot in the yarn, I'm going to pull through my yarn and tighten, just like a knot. The only difference this time is that when I make my loop and I pull through, I'm not going to pull the yarn through the whole way. I'm going to make a little loop for my hook to sit in. Now I'm going to make a chain stitch. This is the foundation stitch of crocheting. In order to make a chain stitch, I'm going to yarn over. You're going to hear that term a lot. Yarn over means take your yarn, this is your tail end of yarn, but take this working end of yarn and pass it over your hook back to front. Now, here's the tricky part. You are going to pull through the loop and make sure everything is nice and loose as you're doing this. You'll notice that in my left hand, I'm holding on to this tail so that it doesn't flip around. So however you want to do this, whichever fingers you want to use to hold on the tail, just make sure you're holding it steady so that it doesn't do a little cartwheel around your hook. That's one chain stitch that I've just made, yarning over and pulling through the loop. So now let's do another one. I'll take my working end of yarn, I'll wrap it back to front over my crochet hook, and I'll pull it through the loop. Notice how I'm orienting the hook down as I pull it through the hoop, just because it fits easier through that way. There's another chain stitch. If I wanted to make another one, I'd yarn over back to front and I'd pull through the loop again. So now I've got 3 chain stitches. Here's something that's really common that happens when people are first starting to make chain stitches. They want all of their stitches to be perfect. So they pull this yarn really, really tightly and they make these tight little crochet stitches like this. Super, super tight, just like that. The problem is, if I pull really, really tightly after every single chain stitch, my chain stitches are so small, I'm never going to be able to fit my hook back in. They're too tight. So one thing I want you to practice when you're first starting to make chain stitches is to keep your tension nice and loose. When you've got your hook through the loop like this, play around with the tension. Pull your hook, pull the working end of yarn to change the size of the loop on your hook. When it's a nice loose size, you can yarn over back to front and you can pull through the loop. Yarn over back and front, pull through the loop again. So practice keeping your loop nice and loose, because later on we're going to need to put the crochet hook through every single one of these chain stitches. So you can watch me as I do a couple more examples. You can make this chain as long as you absolutely want. You'll want to end when your chain stitches are all approximately the same size, because that's going to tell you that you've got the hang of tension and you're ready to move on to the next stitch. Some people just want to make a chain stitch. Great. Make a really long chain, turn it into a bracelet. That's still crochet. So here are all my chains. We can have a look at the shape. They look like tiny little V's. And when I flip it over, the back almost looks like chain link. Probably why it's called a chain stitch. So this is the front side, the side that looks like little loops or V's. And by the way, whenever you mess up with crochet, the great thing is you can just rip it out. So if you want to undo some of your chain stitches, take your working end of yarn and just pull. So I've just undone a whole bunch of chain stitches. I'm going to keep this number of chain stitches for now, but you can keep going as long as you want. So now what we're going to do is we're going to build the first row of crochet stitches into our first chain stitches. The first stitch, the first crochet stitch we'll do is called a single crochet. So this is just like a little knot we're going to tie using the hook. One single crochet stitch is exactly the same height as one chain stitch. So our first row is going to be one chain stitch tall. So to begin, I'm going to be crocheting right to left along this starting chain. And I'm going to start by inserting my hook into this second chain stitch right here. I'm going to skip the first chain stitch because remember, that's how tall my row is going to be. So into this second chain stitch, I'm going to insert my hook right in the middle. Now there's two different ways you can do this. Some people, like me, like to insert their hook in the middle of that second chain stitch so that I've got two pieces of yarn on the top of my hook. The other way of doing it is to insert your hook into the middle of that first chain stitch so that you've only got one loop on top of your hook. Either way is totally fine. Just try to be consistent and it will look fine. So I'll take my hook, I'll insert it in the middle of that chain stitch, but near the bottom so that I've got two pieces of yarn on top of my hook. Now I'm going to yarn over back to front and pull it through that chain stitch. Now I've got two loops of yarn on my crochet hook like this. Now I'll yarn over again back to front, and holding my chains in place so they don't do a cartwheel, I'm going to gently pull through that loop. I'm going to pull through both loops. And that's one single crochet stitch right there. Now to do my next single crochet stitch, I'm going to insert my hook in this second chain stitch, this chain stitch that's next door to the one I just used. So I'll insert my hook again, I'll yarn over and pull through my yarn, so I've got two loops on my hook. I'll yarn over again and pull through both loops on my hook. Now I've got two single crochet stitches. I'll locate the next chain stitch, it's right here. I'll insert my crochet hook, yarn over, pull through so that I've got two loops on my crochet hook. I'll yarn over and pull through again. So now I've got three single crochet stitches. If you look at them from the front closely, the front looks like a little V. That's what the single crochet stitches look like. From the back, each little single crochet Looks almost like a pie, if you know what the mathematical symbol or the Greek symbol pi is. It's almost what they look like from behind. So let's keep going. I'm going to continue putting single crochet stitches in every single one of the chain stitches from my starting chain. So now that I've finished the first row of single crochet stitches, I can turn around and start making the second row of single crochet stitches. So because this row was one chain stitch tall, that's how I'm going to start row 2 as well, since that's also going to be made up of single crochet stitches. So at the end of my first row, I'm going to chain 1. That's the height of my next row. Now I'm going to turn the whole thing from left to right. So now I'm facing the back end of all of the stitches. And here you can really see that pie shape. If you look closely at the back of one of those stitches, it looks like a little pie symbol. So now, in the back side of my single crochet stitches, I'm going to insert my hook right into the first space between stitches. So if you can see right here, there's a nice little opening where I'm going to insert my hook between those stitches. When I insert my hook, I'm going to have 2 yarn loops on the top of my hook from my original row. Then I'm going to yarn over back to front, pull through, and again complete the single crochet stitch. Now I look for the next opening. The next opening is between the next 2 single crochet stitches. I'll insert my hook there so that I've got 2 loops of yarn over my hook from the previous row crochet stitch. I'll yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 again. There's my next crochet stitch. Now I'm going to continue doing that all the way across. Here's my next opening between the 2 pie symbols, and I'll complete another single crochet. Here's my next opening here, and I'll complete another single crochet. Make sure that your tension is still nice and loose, because remember, all of these stitches are like little building blocks. You're just going to continue to build up on top of each other. Now the very last space in this row is between the single crochet and the chain 1 from the row before. So I'm going to place my last single crochet stitch right in between here. Single crochet, just like this. Now I'm done, and I should have the same number of single crochet stitches as I did on the row before. Now on to the next row. I'm going to do another row of single crochet stitches, and you've already got the pattern already. We're just building one on top of each other. So you can imagine that I could be adding row after row of single crochet stitches, and I would end up with a really, really long rectangle. So you can continue adding these types of rows for as long as it takes until you're comfortable with this type of stitch, the single crochet stitch. Here's my next row. I'll chain 1. I'll turn everything over left to right. Now row 2 looks like the pie side. So after I've chained 1, I'm going to look for this first space right here. I'm going to insert my hook, make my first single crochet stitch. I'll look for the next space, which is right here. I'll insert, make my next crochet stitch.